Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz podcast. Thanks for joining us today as we continue our conversation on a bunch of things that have to do with the Catholic world and beyond. My name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined, as usual, by Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
Welcome to you.
Thank you.
And Matt Van Milligan.
Hi.
Welcome, Matt. So we are getting close to Christmas. Mm-hmm. And I know here in our part of the world, we're facing some cooler temperatures. Last evening was snowing galore, right? And the temperatures are dropping. And I was, you can't help but to think about people who don't have adequate coverage,
residencies,
housing, roof over their heads at this time of year, right? A couple weeks ago, me and a few parishioners were driving through the streets downtown with meals. And it did not take us very long to unload these meals to people. And it was cold. Yeah. It was very cold, And anyway, one person that we stopped, there was a group of 4 people, like kind of walking together, so pushing a shopping cart, so we pulled over and asked if they wanted some food. Anyways, one of the guys was just so wonderful. He couldn't stop thanking us, and he just kept saying, "God bless you, God bless you," and he shoved his arm and through the window of my car to thank us and shake my hand or whatever. So and then I said, we have a bunch of food still. Like, where should we head now? And he said, right up the street, there's sort of like a tent village.
Okay.
And so we drove up the street not far from where we were. And I mean, it was just cold and dark. Mm-hmm. I just felt horrible.
For the people.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Not for myself. But,
You're in a nice warm car.
But yeah. And it's just a sad situation that we have going on. And it's one thing because in the summertime we saw, especially after COVID pandemic, this explosion of tent cities, right? And
especially North Bay
area. Yeah, and all across Canada.
I guess across Canada.
And it's not pretty. It's not pretty. That's one thing in the summertime. But now that it's winter,
it's a whole other ballgame.
It's a whole, and for those listening from outside of our own area, like it gets cold here. We're in Northern Ontario, and
it was minus 10 last night.
Yeah,
it gets colder
just
than that.
Like, not even seeing the worst of our weather.
No, it gets down to minus 30, minus 40 sometimes at night.
So all that Celsius. To say is, people have a lot of questions about what we're supposed to do with the homeless, Well,
when you think about it, especially right now when you're doing the shopping and everything else, and I don't know where you guys encounter, but for me, one of the biggest places I encounter people homeless, I'm going to say, is in front of shopping malls or in front. Either they're on the street corners. So when you pull up,
the intersections
and stuff, and asking for money there or whatever, they're just standing there with a sign. And then, or sometimes you see them in front of the store, and then they're getting chased off by security or whatever else now. And so there's multiple different feelings when we come to dealing with the homeless, especially because so there's people there asking for food, money. Normally it's money, but they're asking for whatever you can give, kind of thing. It's normally the sign says something along that. God bless, something along those lines. And there are a couple different mixed feelings that I know that a lot of people go through. And first of all, in our Christian Catholic teachings, Christ talked about, like, we want to give to the poor, we want to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and help heal the sick. So there's a compulsion to want to help these people, but at the same time, I don't know about you guys, but I always grew up with the understanding or whatever that, well, sometimes these people are just going to use whatever money you get to go buy drugs and alcohol. And so there's like the two different sides of that coin when we're talking about helping homeless people or those people asking for money, the beggars, the modern day beggars asking for money. So how do we handle that as Catholics? How do we like, do we like, sometimes you pull up and they just try not to make eye contact with the person as like, I feel guilty, I don't want to give them money, just not make eye contact. Or do you open the window, talk to them, but then you just don't give them anything? Or do you give money to them? Like how are we supposed to handle it? I think that's a pretty good topic, because I don't know about you guys, but I think a lot of times when we encounter these situations, it's always very awkward and not knowing kind of which of these am I morally obligated to do? What is ethical here? What is, if this person's going to buy alcohol, I don't want to necessarily support their habit, but does that prevent me from giving? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and there are it can seem like the same impulse, but coming from two completely different directions. Like on the one hand, you can be like, well, if I just give them money, I might be enabling some behavior or directly funding something that's keeping them in this situation. Yeah. I was like, but if that keeps you from giving, if that keeps you from engaging with people in need at all, that's a problem. And on the other side, you want to recognize that not giving is not an option. So if looking at the scriptures, Christ talks about providing for people in need more than he talks about most other things, or most other things that we would consider just kind of be a moral requirement of our faith. Even in the latter part of Matthew, when he's talking about separating the sheep from the goats, it's what's the criteria for kind of salvation as he's putting it forward? It's provide clothing the naked, feeding the hungry, taking care of those in need. And it's when did we ever see you poor? When did we ever see you hungry? It's whatsoever you did to the least of these, you also did to me. This isn't just kind of a peripheral aspect of our faith. This is our faith in action. So James, the first chapter of James, I think, is when it says, true religion is this, taking care of the widow, taking care of the orphan, taking care of those the destitute, the people whose circumstances are, identifiably below ours. That it's not just okay, I can hold myself at an arm's distance from the poor, those in need, the homeless, because I don't want to enable their life choices or whatever situation brought them here. But you have to do something. You have to the gospel kind of requires us to respond to the poor. So the question becomes, what does that look like? So if not giving money, can you buy somebody a meal? Can you provide for their needs in a practical way? I remember I actually don't encounter the homeless as often as I did when I lived in Ottawa. Yeah. Major cities, you have a lot more. And I remember I was out for lunch while I was working, and I had the other half of my lunch in a to-go thing because I couldn't finish it. And I was walking by someone, and they were asking for either money or food, and I was just in another I wasn't in that space, or I wasn't. And he called out to me directly. He's like, "Are you really going to eat that?" And I was like, you know what? You're right. I gave it to him, and I actually stopped and talked to him and had a conversation. And you said it can be awkward. And it's but there's no awkwardness. There's no difference in dignity between myself and this person. And a lot of the kind of divisions that we draw, are artificial. And it took that kind of moment, or just kind of somebody actually calling me out of my own head, to just to recognize, to break down that kind of artificial separation that kind of keeps us from recognizing kind of those in need as our brothers and sisters.
I like what you said, because it's true. Jesus does talk a lot about that, and yes, in the latter part of Matthew, he makes that we're separating the sheep and the goats. Here's the criteria. Feeding the hungry, taking care. I mean, the corporal works of mercy, right? The first four of them talk about caring for the poor, right? So what you said there was, if we don't have an option, we have to do something. So if someone is confronted, like you were saying, you're on the street, you're in the car at the red light, and someone's staring at you through the window, and you don't want to give money, are you obligated to give money? And I would say no, because there are other things you can do. Let's say someone feels uncomfortable rolling down their window to give money to that person there. Well, then this week, did you give to the food bank? Did you make a donation somewhere? Did you help in another way? We have to look at our income,
of course,
and say, what belongs to other people? What is my fair share to help others in need, right? You think of most parishes have some sort of food bank or food drive or meal that they serve. If that's your regular way of giving, then that's your contribution, right? Or there are other ways. But to just do nothing, I think you're right, is not right. We cannot just do nothing.
You also mentioned, I think a big part of this is the dignity. I think a lot of times when we see these people, we try, because of the awkwardness of the situation, we try to ignore. So then I don't have to deal with the situation as it is. But imagine, just for instance, if you pull up to a lights and there's somebody standing there, imagine if it was, a buddy you went to school with. Would you not roll down your window and be like, "Hey, how's it going?" You know, and talk to that person with dignity, with respect. You would, even though they hit hard times, let's just say, but you would still interact with them in a way that's loving, in a way that's versus ignore them completely on the side. You know what I mean? So I think that's something like when you see them there, it's like, I don't know. I try very hard just to have that conversation, simple. And it's not like I don't enter into 10-minute conversation normally, but it's just like, "Hey, how's it going?" You know, and just kind of like acknowledging that they're there, acknowledging their presence, and then kind of going from there. Depends for me. I've decided that for me, it depends on what I'm there at the store to do. And so, I mean, there's other ways to give and stuff. But for me, if I'm going into the store and they're there, then I am buying a meal at the deli counter or whatever the case may be, and I'm coming out with it, and I'm just offering it to them. And if they don't want it, I mean, sometimes you see them. To give you an idea, I did this once. Didn't see the lady when I went in. I went into the store and everything else, but I came out, and I had bought myself just a little wing pack. So 12 wings with celery, and
With celery,
and then there was a thing of nuts, and it was nuts with some cranberries and some chocolates, and I really wanted this. I was like craving this for a couple
a
days.
vivid memory.
Oh, I love it. I'm drooling right now. Anyways, but I was really craving this, and I was really excited. I was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna give myself a little treat today. I'm in the office all day. This is gonna be great. I'll have this little peanut snack thing, and when I pulled up to the light, there was this lady there and I was just like, oh. And one of the kind of decisions I made was that if I'm going to the store to buy myself a meal and there's somebody there, then I'm going to give I'm going to sacrifice because I can afford to fast for a meal here and there, and so, but I'm going to share whatever I have with that person. That's just my own personal. And so I looked and I was like, well, I kind of really like the wings. I've already eaten some of them in the car on the way out of I'm like, that's like, give someone a half-eaten wing is not going to be great. But I have this bag of chocolates I've been really looking forward to. And I decided that the better sacrifice here would be to give this unopened bag of peanut chocolate cranberry thing. And I'm like, oh, but I really want that. But that was like, it's like to open up the window and be like, hey, listen, I said, I don't have money, but here, I got this bag. And she's like, oh, yeah. But like what I realized from that moment was her ripping it open in front of me and just like shoveling it into her mouth. To me, was I just went, oh, she's actually hungry. Like she's not faking this. You know what I mean? And I don't know why there was a judgment there on my part of being like, oh, she's just gonna pack it away and then maybe try to, I don't know, give it away to somebody else or sell it or something. I don't know. And I was just like, wow, no, she's devouring that. And I was like, oh, thank you, Lord, for showing me that because that helped me. I don't need the chocolate. Not like she needs the chocolate, obviously.
Yeah, it's a good thing to think about because people, like you said earlier, like, are they going to take what I give them and spend it on things that aren't good, right?
Yeah.
And
are we
let's say,
culpable for that?
let's say, for example, they do.
Yeah.
That doesn't change the goodness of your action, right? And so give. Like, I always think of God gives us so many good things.
Even when we turn around.
waste.
Yeah.
Like God gives us so many blessings and so many talents or gifts or, words of encouragement or whatever. And we just turn around and sin or turn around and spoil them or waste them or whatever. What is the difference? Like God is still good, right? Just because we've wasted his gift doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with him. No. God is generous, God is faithful. Well, we're called to do the same thing. If we give money, food, something to someone, and they turn around and use it for a purpose that's not
malicious
sound,
purposes,
we've still done a good thing. Yeah. And I think it's really important to do so. So we're not saying give money to everyone you see.
No, not necessarily.
You might not be able to afford that. What we're saying is you have to do your part. Like, a lot of churches, a lot of charitable groups do clothing drives around this time of year, scarves, mitts, hats, boots, socks.
The giving trees.
Blankets. Yeah. Like, those are needed. Yeah. Those are needed out there. Like, you see people sleeping on the street. It's freezing out there. Like, if everyone does their part, we would be able to make life a little less horrible for people. And I like what you said about the dignity. we all have equal dignity. God has given us all equal dignity. No, we're not better with them. Some of us are a little more fortunate, I guess. But if we all did our part,
Yeah, and more than just kind of equal in dignity, it was like this person, or like this person I encountered, was actually calling me out on my lack of virtue. So it's not like there's no superiority between me, and if there is, it's on the other end because they recognized kind of a deficiency in my attitude. So
Just like
equal
you
in
did.
dignity, but certainly the those in need certainly kind of wake us up to the fact that we're. The gifts that we have don't belong to us. These are just kind of gifts that we have in the meantime to use ultimately for God's work. There's like don't store up treasures on earth where moth and inflation destroy. That's the modern paraphrase. But like the idea is that like yes, that we have wealth, we have food, we have kind of resources, and yes, we have people that we're directly responsible to, our children, our families. It's like, but in most cases, or like a lot of the people that would belong to the church and identify as we have more than we need. And there are certainly those kind of who are in need around us.
I think one of the cool things I've learned is what is with fasting. When we fast, I really like this mentality. I can't remember what speaker that I was listening to. I can't remember who it was, but talked about like when you fast, don't just fast. Fast and give, meaning like you're not going to eat today, then fast
Then
from
give
that
it.
meal. But you're still like then give that meal. Give that meal to someone. Like fast and give. And so when we're called to prayer and fasting, do that, but then give away. Like you're not trying to save money by fasting. You're not trying to. You might lose weight by fasting, but like again, you're not doing it for those reasons. You're fasting for self control and those type of things. But then give that you would already have used. And give it to whoever, give it to the church, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand too, is realizing that a lot of the gifts are given, people give to the church, and that those gifts are given to the church freely, and at one time they was given because rich people were like, I don't know how to deal out to the poor, so here, I'll give it to the church, I'll give this out to the church to help deal with the poor, and then then the church will, but not only giving money, but giving time, because the church can't, like the church then has to hire people to give out resources or whatever the case may be, versus if you're giving your time, like if you don't have money to give, you probably then have time to give. Like it kind of comes one way or the other normally. And so if you have time, then you're volunteering at the soup kitchens, or you're volunteering at your church, and in ways at the St. Francis table or the St. Vincent de Paul or whatever the case, whatever organization is giving to the poor at in your area. And so looking at how you can help those, it doesn't mean only giving money or giving food per se. It's also giving of your time to that.
it should be a regular part of our routine.
Yeah.
Right? I just want to mention the corporal works of mercy.
Mm-hmm.
It's listed in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, also 2447. So the corporal works of mercy consist especially in feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, clothing the naked, visiting the sick and in prison, and burying the dead. And among all these, giving alms to the poor is one of the chief witnesses to fraternal charity. It is also a work of justice that is pleasing to God.
Wow. Yes, there you go. Boom.
Yeah, and then 2446, St. John Chrysostom says,
he's good.
not to enable the poor to share in our goods is to steal from them and deprive them of life. The goods we possess are not ours, but theirs.
There's a story of St. Francis that I really, sorry, not St. Francis, St. Lawrence that I really like. And if you don't know, St. Lawrence is the guy that basically has a bit of sense of humor, but he's the guy, he was a deacon of the church in the 3rd century, and the 300s, I think. And he was the one that what he got told, he got burned alive, and so he was burning on one side, and he basically stood up and said, "Hey, turn me over. I'm done now. I'm done on this side, so flip me over." That's his whole. That's what he's known for, right, St. Lawrence. But his actual why he's a saint, and he's a martyr. But one of the things that came into being was he was there on the altar. So he was the archdeacon, I believe, in Rome at the time, and the Pope got arrested. during mass and was killed right there, martyred right in front of everybody while he was doing mass type thing. And then because he was the archdeacon, he was also in charge of the treasury and some other things. And so the emperor at the time, or the prefect of Rome, I believe at the time, turned to him and said, okay, you have 3 days. I want all the riches that has to do with this Christianity business. I want all of them. They're mine. Anything that has to do with the Pope. And the idea being if they went and killed a leader of the church or whatever else, they would collect all that. Like the goods went directly to Rome. To the emperor and so on. And so he's like, okay, so like I just killed him. I want everything to do with the church. I killed the top guy. I want everything. You got 3 days. And so St. Lawrence went around. He was deacon, and he basically sold everything and gave it everything, any kind of material riches to the poor. Gave him around to widows and orphans and everything else. And 3 days later, he walked into Rome. He walked into the meeting with the emperor, to the prefect, I should say. And he was empty-handed. And he's like, okay, where are the riches of your church? I want all the riches of your church. And he said, I brought them with me. And he turned around and told him to open the doors. And then the cripple and the poor walked in. And his whole thing, I mean, this guy was a jokester, but also had some clever wit, I was gonna say, but just specifically, like, no, this is the riches because we have the poor, because we have these people that we have to take care of. It brings a different side out of us out, and that was kind of something that he was kind of relating to. Was like, we have to do this. We have to take care of the poor. Now he was martyred because of that, because he did that. That's why he was martyred. But the idea is still being there that the riches of the church are the poor, and being and taking care of them and being able to self-sacrifice so that we can take care of them,
Okay, on another addition, I'd like to add to this here. There are the visible homeless that we see,
yes.
Right? There are the visible poor, those who live on the street, those who ask for help, those sort of things. But increasingly right now, we're seeing people who might be invisibly poor, right?
Homeless, living in their cars.
Those are the people who are living in their cars or living
couch
in
surfing or
friends' apartments,
living at parents' houses because they
can't
can't
afford
it.
rent. Maybe living sort of check to check, whether there's assistance programs or things like that. So there's another layer of this problem that we have as well. And so what does that change about our mission to help those, like not just the ones we see on the street, but in general, right? We have a duty to help the poor in general.
Yeah, and if you expand kind of the category of of those in need, yes, we have kind of the dire cases of abject poverty, and yes, of course, we should do what we can to kind of address that. But even kind of more broadly, those who are in need, those without kind of stability, like even take second chapter of Acts. The believers had everything in common and gave to each as they had a need. We have people in our community, people or like fallen on hard circumstances. Sometimes being able to hold down a job is difficult, or it just encountered kind of a rough go. Like, what can we do as members of the church? What can we do as the church to kind of not just satisfy an immediate need for hunger? Not just giving a meal, but like long term, can we give people a place to stay? Can we invite people into our lives and give them that stability that maybe helps them take the next step? One of the things that we've done in our home, because again, we don't live in a city anymore. We don't live in kind of we have a guest room, and we actually built this in the first place for somebody who was kind of between situations, and this is something we can do. We can invite them to come and live in our house, be a part of our family, and if this helps them take the next step, great. So it can be a real ministry, or it can be a real kind of practice of virtue to actually invite people into your life, give people a place to stay, but also give them kind of your time. Kind of
and your love, and
share life with them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. It's showing them the dignity too, like we talked about before, but just like to have that one-on-one. That not only are you like worth just talking to, but also that you're worth being part of my family. You know what I mean? That's a different acceptance past the point of giving somebody $1 on the street. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's a much bigger and a much stronger commitment. I mean, we see this in as people welcome other people into their homes, and you have people that are living, as you mentioned, I know of students, because as a professor, I know of students that are like sleeping 3 or 4 people into a room just to try to save some money and stuff. Now, there's a difference between trying to save money as a student and then an actual dire need, and those are. If you're willing to self-sacrifice to save a couple bucks, that's good on you. And I think that's more towards fasting and self-control and self-preservation, which is great, versus not being able to afford it at all. Right. There's also the attitude there too, you know what I mean? And so some people are just like, if life happens, that's kind of, saying like life happens, and you can be in that spot where, I don't know, you went on disability or you lost your job or whatever the case may be. But understanding, being in people's lives enough to have that relationship so that they could turn to you and ask. I mean, it is a prideful thing to be able to ask for help. You know what I mean? Like, I've been in the spot before where I don't want to ask for help, and it's hard to ask for help. But also on the flip side, when someone's able to. So having that closer relationship with people, just in general, so that if they are in need, that they are able to ask. You know what I mean? And to be able to, for you, I know you guys, because two of the things that, like, you talk about your home being open, but the other thing that you guys have is your second vehicle becomes like everybody's second vehicle. But it kind of is known along the family that if someone needs a second vehicle for a couple of days, they can ask you, and you guys would, if you don't need it, you'll probably just lend them to have. But that's another idea of like people in need and in needing of a, whatever the case may be, and you guys just. That seems to be now common knowledge, if you will, but it's that your hearts are that open, to be able to do that. It's kind of cool.
So from this conversation, we're going to say that one of the duties that Catholics have also is, like, part of our Catholic social teaching is that, like, adequate housing and shelter, the basic needs of human dignity, they're human rights, right?
Yeah.
So an element of what we can do to help too is to ensure that there are proper things in place through our government and through our agencies and through churches that respect the dignity of people. And people today, like, rent is going up, food is going up, cost of everything is going up. You're seeing more and more people relying on others or help for others. You see you see the use of food banks soaring.
Yeah.
Even in our parish community, lots of more people are asking the church for help, and we're happy to help because we have the resource to do so because of the generosity of our parishioners, right? So one of the things that I think we can't forget is we have to be on the ball here when it comes to legislation or things that the city puts forward wherever you live that makes sure that we are caring for the poor, right? It's one thing. It's one thing to have nice things in a city, but we can't neglect the poor, and that's part of our duty as Catholics is to make sure that that's happening. Right. So to be aware, what is out there for people? What is the government doing to help, or what are we doing to help? What is the church doing to help? Like those are all things that I think we should be aware of. In the wintertime where we live, our city opens up an emergency shelter when it gets very cold, so people can go inside. Those are things that are nice. I know in our city we have different agencies that cover most meals throughout the week. And
different church groups work together to make sure that, they're being fed on Thursday, on Friday, right? Exactly.
And different secular groups as well. So people work together, which is nice. But with how our economy is doing right now and how things are going up, I think we should have greater concern, not only for our own personal spending, our own personal money, but also for others, those of others, right? Like, we have to be aware that there are people struggling and suffering around us, and while, yes, we have to have an open heart to help them in maybe material ways if we can afford it, we also have to do so. We also have to help in ways that are concrete, like concrete in establishing processes or establishing laws or establishing things that will help them find the basic human rights that we say.
Yeah. I'm just smiling to myself because the occasion that like we have this visible increase in need, that like people, it seems like more and more that people like that this is an occasion or an opportunity for individuals within the church, but the church itself to grow in virtue, to like to be kind of sanctified. And when I was smiling, I think it's Archbishop Charles Chaput. I'm not sure if it's original to him, but I heard it from him that he says that the poor, the rich were given to the poor to satisfy their needs, but the poor were given to the rich to make sure that they don't go to hell. that this is an opportunity to practice virtue. But like, and it's funny the way he puts it, but actually, like, it comes right back to that kind of biblical requirement, as that, you know, even the rich young man that comes to Jesus. He says, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? And he says, follow the commandments. He's like, I've done this, since I was a child. Like, okay, if you want to be perfect. So like Jesus is asking a question that he didn't actually answer in the first place. He says, sell your possessions and give to the poor. That like this is the kind of highest act of virtue that you can. And he goes away sad because he was very rich. He had a lot to kind of give away, or he stood to lose more than other people by kind of giving away. But I think that is one of two places where even the word perfect is mentioned in the Gospels, but Jesus actually says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. I think that's the only other mention. If you want to be perfect, this is how you act. You give of yourself completely and satisfy the needs of others. And thankfully, we've had kind of movements in the church that have really, taken this directly and literally. You have, Mother Teresa, or like
Saint Francis,
you said Saint Francis earlier,
Lawrence,
that it's like you have religious orders, religious communities, groups of people that have a really, really specific charism that like they go and live, not just satisfy the needs of the poor, but go and live with the poorest of the poor, meet them eye to eye, recognize their inherent dignity, that, this is actually living our faith in a concrete way, in a corporeal way, in a material way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's lots to do, because you think of your riches, think of your riches. If everyone gave a little bit of their time or their resources, I think of, I don't want to sound old, but when I was growing up, I remember, we had smaller houses.
Yeah.
We shared rooms. We lived in tight quarters. We, had fun with the neighbors and all these different things. And now people are building bigger homes, bigger rooms, isolating themselves.
Everybody has their own car.
Everyone has their own car. You use public transportation. No one talks to each other. All this stuff, and that's contributing, I think, to a lack of care for our neighbor.
I would agree. Yeah.
And so we have to reclaim care for our neighbor. We have to. Because if we actually loved our neighbor, look at the 10 commandments. The first 3 commandments are to love God. The next 7 commandments are to love our neighbor, right? It's clear. Jesus talks about it so much, but we're slowly, if not already, losing a love for our neighbor. We have to reclaim that, I think.
I think one of the things that my son pointed out to me, Jojo, he one of the things he said to me when we were camping is like, Dad, we were camping, and he's like, yeah, we can live like this, right? Like we could live like this. We got like 2 pairs of clothes, like a tarp over our heads, and like we could actually live like we don't need everything that we have back at home to live. Like this is something that we could do. And we talked then about wintertime and everything else, and then like, oh, okay, well maybe not quite.
Smashing the ideals of a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah, but more the idea. One of the things, like I remember sitting there, and we were out in like I'm sitting in front of fire and everything. I'm smirking to myself at his innocence, but also at the time, like, no, but there's a lot to life. Like I have 3 or 4 pairs of shoes. I don't need 3 or 4 pairs of shoes. Well, I have my dress shoes. I have my boots for the farm. I have my running shoes. Like, you know what I mean? Like I justify what I have for the reasons that I have it. But if I was truly in need, I have 1 pair of shoes. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's every kind of shoe that I have. You know what I mean? Like I have, so understanding the comforts that we have in life and potentially like looking at giving those up. One time Advent, we talked about this on a previous show a couple years ago. I remember just like that Advent used to be and still is in some traditions of Eastern Catholic churches, more like Lent, like you're giving up something.
More penitential.
More penitential. Yeah. And so looking at Advent as we're approaching Christmas is, what can I live without? Mm-hmm. What can I live without? And then maybe offering that to You know, that's a kind of a cool way of maybe living our way up to Christmas. You know what I mean? It's kind of cool.
Very true. Okay, we're running out of time here, but just to recap,
Yeah.
I think it's very important that we do something. So if we're going to see someone on the street as we're at a red light,
Yeah.
like we don't have to ignore them. Yeah. We could say hello. We could wave. We could do whatever. If you don't have money on you, or if you can't afford to give that day, like what can you give? There are so many ways in which we can help others in need, right? So part of our routine as Catholics should be always to do something, right? The other thing I think is to grow in care and concern for our neighbor. Mm-hmm. Like if we actually cared about people, we would be appalled by what we see, you know. And I think that let's be more aware of what's happening around us, and let's show an interest. We know that people are suffering around us. So what are we doing to help? Are we encouraging our members of parliament? Are we volunteering at our church to help with their programs? Are we supporting local agencies? There's just so much that we can do to help. If everyone did something, we would see such a drastic difference. We did not touch on some of the difficulties that some people on the street face, right? And I don't think that was our sort of place here. And I think that was for a purpose. It doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter whether people are facing mental illness, addictions, whatever. It's still
or just
our
poor
duty.
life choices. Yeah, like it's
still our duty to love.
It reminds me of that meme where it's one of those, you know. So love feed the hungry. Well, God, I get what you're saying, but not those that have addictions, right? And like, did I stutter? Like, no, just feed the hungry. I didn't say feed the hungry, but accept, you know, like those. No, I said feed the hungry. If they're hungry, feed them. If they have needs, satisfy those needs, even if they're suffering from whatever it might be. That, like, Jesus didn't care. He went and sat with the prostitutes, with the tax collectors, he sat down, he had a meal with them. He shared food in the same bowl with them. He didn't treat them like he treated them like equals, and he loved them for where they're at, you know? And it's only through that if anything, is through the love that he had for them where they're at. And that was the true evangelization.
So maybe we can make that a part of our Christmas Advent journey this year, is to be a little more aware of what we can do to help. So I'd like to maybe throw it out there for those listening, because maybe people are doing stuff right now that we haven't even mentioned. Maybe they have a way of helping those in need that would be helpful for others to hear as well. So maybe you can drop us a line on our social media pages, or send us an email at askus@thecatholicbuzz.com. As we get closer to Christmas, let's pray. Let's pray for those who are in need. Let's pray that we can be more aware of the needs of others as well. That's all the time we have for today. So for Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milligan, my name is Father Daniele. We'll see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.